Hey everybody, Young Grasshopper here. Welcome to the Cliffside Bunker in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And this is another episode of Battleboard Basics. And this is a series where we take a certain combat scenario. We do a run through, a dice chucking run through. And it's both a strategy and a tutorial type video. It's always for new players. Help them understand the dynamics of rolling out battles. Take a look here at a battle board. We have it already set up with the allies that belong in France. Take a look. You can see that France is bare. I always make the suggestion that if you're going to set up the table, just go ahead and set up these particular units from France on the battle board. It just saves the congestion in Europe there, and plus 99.9% of the time Germany will go in there and attack. Should be 100% of the time, but there's some people out there that don't. But anyway, the mass majority of the time Germany is going to come in turn one and attack. And this is the taking of Paris. The taking of Paris. We're going to roll this out. Let's move some things in there. Now, the beauty about a lot of these videos is that I don't necessarily have to just go ahead and throw in the units that I necessarily suggest. If you remember in a previous video, the G1 attacks, I went over everything that I like to do and I explained why I like to do them, and I'm very conservative. However, with these Battleboard Basic, I can sort of experiment a little, maybe with what other people are doing, more aggressive people are doing. So I'm going to start moving in some units. I'm going to take these 3 tanks that are in Holland and move them in next door, and I'm going to put these in the 3 spot tanks, and also these infantry from Holland. Gonna go in, walk in the Battle of Paris, and these 2 artillery as well, and they get 2 or less right there. And again, continuing, these AA guns cannot be moved during the combat movement phase. But there's 3 more infantry from Western Germany that I can reach. And these are also right next door. However, some people like to take at least 3 of these mechanized infantry, go through northern Italy and come into southern France with an aircraft. So I'm going to leave 3 back. I'm going to take only 1 mechanized infantry. Alright. And I put that in the 2 spot. We'll get around to that. I'm just going to leave that there. There's a single artillery here. Now I'm going to make this interesting as well. Something else I highly do not suggest doing is bringing in aircraft. But for this particular video, because some people do, I'm going to bring in a tactical bomber. And don't quite have enough because of those mechanized infantry going into southern France. So I'm going to bring the 3 tanks from greater southern Germany into southern France. I'm sorry, into Paris. There, let's go take a look at it. So this is more than enough. I mean, you know, some people might not bring in so many tanks, but here's what I got to say about this. I mean, if you come to the Cliffside Bunker and there's a 6-player game, we all arrive early, and maybe many people have drove to get here over an hour or so. You don't want to do something that's going to put your entire nation at jeopardy, where you get hurt so bad that you're playing the rest of the day on the defense. Now, if you're playing online, you can just hit the reset button, or you can just walk away from your game and say, sorry, it didn't work out for me, I'm quitting this game, right? But when you gather for a face-to-face game, tabletop game, your actions have consequences. If you get too aggressive and you thin out your battles too much, and you test the dice, it could turn real bad on you. But anyway, moving on. I think we have enough here. Nothing I see here is deemed foolish or anything. I mean, there's good units here. I don't recommend this, but we'll see how it goes. Now we have to calibrate our board for combined arms, and we've done this a little bit. We got a mechanized infantry that can be boosted by an artillery unit. We have an artillery unit right there, so it normally attacks at 1, but because of the artillery, it's going to move up to the at 2. We also have 2 more artillery, so not only do the mechanized infantry get boosted, but the regular infantry as well get boosted. So 2 of those can move from the at 1 spot to the at 2. Now the tactical bomber gets boosted on attack as well, not on defense, but definitely on attack. They get boosted by a fighter that is paired with it. It normally attacks at 3, but with a fighter it attacks at 4. But there's no fighter here. Why is it attacking at 4? Well, it also gets boosted by tanks. So tactical bombers become basically strategic bomber type strength on attack if there's a pairing fighter or tank with it. So good units for that, excellent units for that. But we're going to have to survive this AA gun. So now we're calibrated here to roll out the Battle for Paris. All right. Now, normally, typically, the attacker begins rolling. But because there's an AA gun here, the AA gun will get its opportunity, will get its shot at any aircraft coming in, and we'll get into anti-aircraft guns in a tutorial video in the future. But for now, right now, I can say that it's going to get 1 dice to try and shoot this down. It must roll a 1 to be able to do that. If it doesn't get any more shots, no matter how many combat rounds there are coming up. So let us resolve that, and we will move on to Germany and their attack roll. So prior to the first combat round, let me just push this like that, keep it stable. So prior to the first German attack combat round, we're going to resolve the AA gun, and that AA gun, because there's 1 aircraft coming in, it will get 1 dice, 1 opportunity to roll a 1 to shoot it down. Here we go, and it misses. So the aircraft survives. Now we're going to begin. That was a special sequence that happens anytime there's AA guns present with aircraft attacking. So now we're going to go into German round 1, first combat round. Attacker begins. Now I always begin from the lowest and go to the highest. And that's just me. Most people do that. Some people go from the highest to the lowest, which is fine, right? That's their prerogative. But what I'm absolutely saying for table etiquette, if you decide to roll from top down, then always, always, always do that. All right. I always roll from bottom up. I never, ever roll from top down. Haven't, never. And when you swap from, oh, I'm doing this time, oh, I'm doing this, that's bad etiquette, because when you're rolling and we're trying to understand what you're hitting, it's like, oh, you missed them all. No, I hit because I'm going from bottom up this time. So you understand, that's just bad etiquette. Make your choice what sequence you're going to do it in, and always, always stick with that. So for me, I always go bottom up. Let's start with those infantry. There's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 infantry, and they need a 1 to hit, and they all miss. Next, 4, 5, 6. We'll take another dice, and here we go. 6 dice. Now these are 2 or less. 2 or less. There's 2 hits right there. Not a good roll. And the tanks roll at 3 or less. There's 6 of those. We have 6 dice for 3 or less. 1, 2, 3. All right, and 1 at 4 for the tactical bomber now, and it hits as well. So 6 hits. That's good. That is good for Germany. Now I always say, when you do that first combat round, your goal should be 5 casualties. 5. If you hit 4, it's fine. 3, not so good. Anything less than 3, horrible. But 5 is good. That means this is really good at 6. Good for the first combat round. Now, as the defender, we must declare what our casualties are before we roll. And trust me, it's a hard rule, and you should do it. A lot of people are just at the dice tray and they say, you know what, I'll just select my casualties later, and they go ahead and roll. Now, their choice of what they take is going to be different from before they roll to after they roll. And it usually depends on how well they roll. If they roll really well, then what they chose to take off before they rolled could be very different than what they choose now after they roll. That's why we must always follow the rules and put along the casualty line or back 6 units. You want to always take an AA gun as a casualty because it gets no more dice from here on in. It had its chance to shoot down the plane and it won't get any more dice. We want to take this off as a casualty as part of our 6 so that we go in and enter into the next combat round with as many rolling units, with as many units that get dice to actually shoot something down. So there's our 6 casualties. We've declared that. We're going to go ahead and roll. We're going to include in our roll the casualties plus what's left over. We have 8. So defending now, 8 at 2 or less. 8 at 2 or less. And not bad. We got 4. All right. 4 hits. Okay. 2 or less. Now we got two tanks here. We're gonna roll 3 or less. We need 3 or less, and we got another hit. And we have 1 defending fighter, defends at 4 or less, and that's a hit too. So not too bad for France actually. So they also are going to take off 6 attackers. There's 5, and we have a bit of a dilemma here, but you know what? We always kind of go with the infantry. They're the cheap ones. So going into combat round number 2 now. Going into combat round number 2, we have no AA gun, but even if the defender for some reason decided to keep the AA gun, it doesn't get to shoot again. It only gets the 1 shot, so it's gone. Now we're going into the attacker. Again, always starts each combat round. And we got to double check and make sure that we have the combined arms correctly calibrated. So there are still tanks, of course. So this is still at 4. All right. And we are matched up with enough artillery so that they are boosted. Let's go into it now. Now it's going to be 5. 5 at 2 for the Germans. Good roll. 3 hits. And 6 now for the tanks at 3 or less. Lots here. So 4. Another 4. So I'm not going to continue with the tactical bomber because we don't need any more. There are 7 casualties in this round. 3, 4, 5, 6. So we don't need to continue. To do so would be a waste of time. So all of the units are casualties, so we don't need to move them back. We'll just go straight into our defense roll. And we get 3 at 2 or less. 3 at 2 or less. Nothing. And 2 tanks at 3 or less. 1 only, and 1 at 4 for the fighter, and 2. So they will lose 2 units. Now, knowing that they don't have to enter a 3rd combat round, whatever they keep, they're actually going to keep and place back on the board. Big strategy here when removing casualties. The strategy being, you know, what might I lose more entering another combat round, or knowing that this is the last time you'll have to remove casualties, what do you want to keep ultimately? So I forget what the hits were. Could have been 3. but we will just go ahead and remove that, of course, this, of course, and this. Now, not a big deal if you want to keep a fast mover instead of a slow artillery, but we're going to go ahead and keep the artillery because it attacks and defends at 2, whereas the mech on its own only attacks at 1. So whether you're keeping an artillery because it attacks and defends more than a mech would, or if you value the speed of the mech to get to the front lines, which is also valid. But that's it. All this comes off. And the Germans now control Paris. There's a few things about this for new players watching that you must remember. Okay. And now this aircraft does not land on newly taken territories. During non-combat moves, it will fly back somewhere else. Now this will be exchanged for a minor industrial complex. So major downgraded to a minor on capture. And the 19 IPCs that France is holding as their cash on hand because they lost their capital now goes to the captor. So that 19 cash on hand now will go over to the German bank. All right. Now I just want to explain as well. Let's say, for example, the Germans were successful in taking this, okay? And now Germany controls this as well as this. If Germany controls this, at the end of their turn, don't forget to convoy. All right, so this is actually one of those negative things about first turn taking southern France. It's like, yes, you go up 3, but you're giving 2 boats a chance to convoy that income right away before you even collect it from the bank. So that's just a little thing that I want to make clear. We're not going to do a whole battle board basics video about southern France. So, and anyway, thanks guys, appreciate it. Hope that was useful. And look out for other videos where we do other combat scenarios. Usually I'd like to talk about the combat scenarios that present themselves in the turn 1. I did a German turn 1 video. I did a Russian turn 1 video. A Japan turn 1 video is coming up, so perhaps we can roll out things like Pearl Harbor. We can roll out scenarios like an amphibious assault on the Philippines, things like that. So, you know, keep a lookout for this Battleboard Basics series as we kind of run along the strategy series, following up some of these run-throughs on the combat that we may talk about in the turn 1 videos that I'm doing right now. Alright guys, thanks, cheers. May all your rolls be ones, and see you in the next vid. Take care.